Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what's going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with our wide receiver start and sit video for week 2 of the NFL season here on the Fantasy Headliners. And if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, or maybe you just forgot from last season, we are always transparent with our accuracy from the week prior. Now, the threshold for wide receivers is 10 fantasy points in half PPR leagues. If I list you as a start and you get 10 or more fantasy points, that is a hit. If I list you as a sit and you get less than 10 fantasy points, that is a hit. Now, if I list you as a start or a sit and it goes the other direction, I put you as a start, you get less than 10, you are a miss. Now, you get it, right? You understand what I'm talking about. So let's take a look at last week's accuracy. The goal for me is always over 70%. Unfortunately, we just missed that in week 1. Last week, we ended up hitting 65%. We were over 70% heading into Monday Night Football. Unfortunately, Edwards landing right on 10 points ended up getting me, and then we missed on a couple of other guys as well. Marquise Brown was the hit for us on Monday night, but Kirk, Samuel, and Davis were all guys last week that we listed as starts that ended up hitting. Jamar Chase, Zach Pascal, Mike Williams were guys that I listed at sits that ended up missing because they were starts. So 51 of 75 correct predictions, or maybe that's 79. I can't tell. I'm looking at Jake's handwriting right now, and I can't understand what that is. It's either 75 or 79, one of the two. But also as a reminder too, we got a huge giveaway for the month of September. We are giving away a nice little package, no pun intended, that includes the Manscaped Perfect Package. It includes a signed Justin Jefferson jersey and a Trevor Lawrence rookie card. And all you got to do is download the Prize Picks app, create a new account, use the code word headliners, and deposit $20. Prize Picks is going to match your deposit. You're going to get to play for some money next week, and you're going to be entered into our drawing to win this awesome giveaway. So again, download that Prize Picks app, create an account, download $20. Make sure that you are in a state that is viable first, and then you're going to be entered into this contest. But ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to head into it. So let's talk about our start and sit for week 2, and it begins on Thursday Night Football. New York at the Washington Football Team. And for New York, just didn't look great last week, but I'm still going to go with Sterling Shepard. Last week, I did have Sterling Shepard, ended up listed as a start, and he hit. And the one thing I like about Sterling Shepard is he ended up playing 95% of the offensive snaps last week, and he led the team with 9 targets. He's loving life in the slot there. Kenny Golladay and Darius Slayton both had some targets and some receptions. Kadarius Toney didn't look good at all. I don't know going up against Washington if this is a team that's really ready to take a step forward at the wide receiver position, but I think Sterling Shepard in half PPR and full PPR leagues is a guy that we're going to hammer into our lineup because he's going to get more than enough targets. He's out there more than enough. For the Washington Football Team, we're going to go with Terry McLaurin as a start this week. Hard to give up on Terry McLaurin, even with Tyler Heineke taking over at quarterback, and no Fitzmagic there. And Dyami Brown is going to bring our first Prize Picks prop to watch this week. And I'm going with Brown over 2.5 receptions this week, which is his current prop listed over on Prize Picks. He played 92% of the offensive snaps last week, and more than likely McLaurin will end up seeing Bradbury. That could give Brown a little. Now, I know he's got Jackson over there, but I really like a guy like Dyami Brown, who was on the field so much last week, with a guy like Curtis Samuel, who's supposed to be the wide receiver too, missing from the lineup right now. A guy on the field that much in a matchup going up against New York where we're probably, we're going to run it, but they're going to have to sling it around a little bit as well. Heineke didn't look too bad last week when he came in. I think he's going to get the Brown to ball a little bit more often, or the ball to Brown a little bit more often, and we're going to end up seeing him go over those 2.5 receptions. Cincinnati at Chicago is going to be my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Why is that? Well, last week, both of these teams allowed over 55 fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Are we going to see that same type of production from these teams this week? it's quite possible that we do see that. Ja'Marr Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins for Cincinnati, they're all going to be starts for me. There are a few teams where honestly we are going to have to list their wide receivers all as starts every single week, and we are just going to have to keep our fingers crossed that 2 or 3 of them end up hitting. It is going to be tough to call on any single week who's actually going to have the big week. Now, we know Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins, they're the guys last week that balled out, right? They played absolutely well last week. But Tyler Boyd, if we remember back to the Chicago-Los Angeles Rams matchup, Cooper Kupp out of the slot burned the Chicago Bears all over the field. We could end up seeing the same thing from Tyler Boyd this week. If that happens, then one of these guys are going to end up getting left out. So who will that end up being? That's why it's going to be so tough to call these positions on a weekly basis, because some of these teams have 2+ wide receivers that can make huge contributions every single week, and we just don't know who it's going to be week in and week out. For Chicago, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, I'm going to start them both this week. Marquise Goodwin actually saw quite a bit of targets last week. Kind of caught me off guard a little bit, but Robinson and Mooney will both continue to be the wide receiver 1 and 2 on this team, and the matchup is much better this week, right? We know that Rams matchup was going to be tough. Now Andy Dalton is going to be going up against Cincinnati, who didn't fare that well against wide receivers last week. Hopefully he has a little bit more success getting the ball to them. Man, Houston fans, nothing against y'all, but y'all sound like Dallas Cowboy fans this week. Holy moly, you won one game against the worst team in the league last year, and y'all are going nuts over it. Hey, great. That's awesome. I don't think you're going to get too many of those this year, okay? It was Jacksonville. Let's hold our horses a little bit. Enjoy the win, but understand you're not going to the playoffs, okay? Here's the thing about Houston. The team, yes, played well, but are they going to get that every single week? I don't know. Going up against a team like Cleveland, they're not going to be able to just hand the ball off to Mark Ingram 22 times, right? They're going to have to sling it a little bit more. So for Houston, it's still going to be Brandon Cooks. They're going to have to throw more against Cleveland. And even though the big plays will be limited a little bit against the Browns for Cooks, Houston isn't going to have a ton of time to throw. So hopefully Danny Amendola and Brandon Cooks are the two guys that they're using in those routes to get them open quickly. So from Danny Amendola, it does sound like Anthony Miller is going to finally be back this week, but Amendola played so well last week, I don't necessarily think they just slot Miller back in. So again, with the quick passes needing to get the ball out, I still think that that's going to be going over to Danny Amendola, and he can end up seeing more than enough targets to hit those 10 fantasy points this week. For the Cleveland Browns, well, it would have been nice to know last week that Odell Beckham Jr. was going to end up being missing. I mentioned this on the live show a couple of times. For weeks now, we've been hearing about how Odell Beckham Jr. is doing just fine. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Kevin Stefanski goes, oh, well, he hasn't taken any hits recently. Bro, what? Like, okay, so for now, I'm done with Odell Beckham Jr. Until I see him on the field balling out, I don't want him anywhere near my lineup. So, who effing knows, right? I don't. That's literally what it says in my notes right now. Who effing knows? I'm not putting Odell Beckham Jr. So no Odell Beckham Jr., definitely Jarvis Landry. And then for Donovan Peoples-Jones, I do like his upside to score this week a little bit more. Schwartz is going to be a volume guy in this offense, but going up against Houston this week and probably running a lot with Chubb and Hunt, how much volume will there really be to go around? The Los Angeles Rams, with Matthew Stafford looking just fabulous in week 1, might be one of those teams now where we have to start 3 wide receivers every single week from this team, and fingers crossed that one of them ends up hitting, and that guy would end up being Van Jefferson. We're starting Kupp and Woods no matter what, okay? Those are the clear 1 and 2s in this offense. There's no issues there with me. Kupp and Woods will both see plenty of targets, but Van Jefferson is going to be really, really interesting because they clearly want to push the ball down the field, and that is going to be Jefferson. Yeah, we saw some big plays with Kupp, but Jefferson's going to be the guy who's really going to stretch the field. And you love to see it because after the draft pick, adding Tutu Atwell and Deshaun Jackson, bringing him in, I was like, man, Van Jefferson, I wanted to see him get the chance. It looks like he still may end up getting the chance. For the Indianapolis Colts, I've got everybody listed as a sit this week. I mean, last week, Chicago barely had anybody listed as a sit, and that was with Allen Robinson, or anybody with start, and that was with Allen Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney. I don't think I can trust Pittman, Campbell, Pascal, any of them this week, and a matchup as tough as the Los Angeles Rams. Buffalo is going to look to get back on track after a very disappointing loss to the Steelers in week 1. Can they do it against division opponent Miami Dolphins? Well, we know Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley are going to be starts every single week. Diggs with 14 targets and Beasley with 13 targets. As we said all offseason, this was going to be a team that was going to throw, right? Missing Zach Moss last week. Even though Devin Singletary actually didn't look that bad, they're not running it with him. They're running it with Josh Allen, and even then, they're not running it that often. They're throwing. Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs are going to be the guys that are going to get the most targets, and then really Gabriel Davis for me is going to go boom or bust, but he's going to need a touchdown. The odd man out for me in this offense is going to be Emmanuel Sanders. He got 8 targets last week, but I don't think he's going to be getting big enough plays to amass the amount of yards that he would need to be a start unless he scores. For Gabriel Davis, again, he's going to be that big play guy. He's a guy that can stretch the field. You get one catch for 40, 50, 60 yards, you're that close to reaching 10 points for me. Emmanuel Sanders, if all of his catches are sitting around 8, 9, 10 yards maybe, he's going to have to get several of those to be able to get to the point of being a start. And that's going to be tough. And that's why I've got him listed as a sit here. And for the Miami Dolphins, we know that we get Will Fuller back. And I'm going to put him as a start in his first game back this year. And I'm going to put Jalen Waddle as a start as well. Waddle could end up being a volume monster for this team. A guy that can win over the middle of the field. He can win down the field. He can do a lot of different things that makes this offense better. I like him and Tua being able to connect a little bit more than what he would be able to do with Devontae Parker. And then for me, kind of like adjustments mentioned with Gabriel Davis, Fuller may only need one really big play to help establish that fantasy value for the week. You do that once, and then you only need like 4 receptions left the rest of the game to even hit that mark, not even counting the yards themselves, right? So if that happens, then we get a lot closer to those 10 fantasy points. And because of that, Will Fuller, the big play potential. Last week, Buffalo obviously did a pretty decent job of shutting that down with the Steelers, but I do expect them to try and push the ball down the field a little bit more, and that's going to be Fuller who gets it. The Patriots and Jets battle will see us bring in 2 of our rookie quarterbacks with Mac Jones and Zach Wilson. Who's going to win that battle? Well, for me personally, I think the wide receivers in New England might help a little bit more this week, but I've got a few starts in this matchup. For the New England Patriots, I'm going with Nelson Agholor and Jakobi Meyers. Now, I mentioned in my waiver wire video that Agholor is kind of the guy that I want to own. Going up against this New York offense should provide a little bit more opportunity for big play, and Nelson Agholor led the team last week with 37% of their team air yards. And that's why I said I would like Agholor in this offense more than Jakobi Meyers, because with Agholor, I do believe that he's the big play guy that can stretch the field and score from anywhere. For Jakobi Meyers, though, I'm still going to play him this week and list him as a start. He didn't end up being a start last week. He couldn't hit the 10 points, but he had 9 targets with led the team, and he played 98% of the offensive snaps. He was always out there, and being on the field leads to a better opportunity for more volume. So I'm going to be going with him as a start this week as well. For the New York Jets, going back to Corey Davis, we saw it last week. That connection with Zach Wilson is there. And I'm also going to go with Elijah Moore again if Jamison Crowder is out. So again, that all depends on Jamison Crowder being out. If he's not out, if Jamison Crowder ends up playing this week, then we're going to take a little bit of a different look at Elijah Moore. Now, it was a tough first week for Elijah Moore, but that breakout could be coming soon. He had some of those air yards last week to back up the potential breakout. It just didn't end up translating into anything. Zach Wilson, first start, maybe a little off target. Let's expect these two to hook up a little bit more really soon, but a lot is going to depend on Jason Crowder. Another team that basically just lied to us last week, right? The San Francisco 49ers. What happened with Brandon Ayuk? All right. That's what everybody has been speculating about. And it has to do with a lot of different things. Nobody knew that Brandon Ayuk was going to be limited this week, but he barely got out there. For some reason or another, coming from Kyle Shanahan, is that after dealing with the hamstring injuries and being outperformed by Trent Sherfield and needing to become a better pro, and there's just all these excuses as to why Brandon Ayuk didn't do anything last week. Is he going to be finally out there this week? Maybe, but let me see it. Like, I got to see him get back out on the field, playing a lot of snaps, getting a lot of targets before I can even think about starting him, especially after everything that we've heard for the past week. Deebo Samuel, 100%, right? We saw him in this lineup last week have a great week. Philadelphia did shut down Atlanta last week, but Deebo balled out himself, and his best competition at the position is sitting over on the bench right now. So 59% of the total team air yards was third best in the National Football League last week for Deebo Samuel. So he is absolutely going to be a start for me this week. And for the Philadelphia Eagles, look, Jalen Hurts, I said all offseason long, if the dude can take that next step, then I'll buy in. But I don't know if he can take that next step as the passer. And even all the messages we were getting from the Eagles is he hadn't taken that next step. Oh man, going up against Atlanta, it sure as hell looked like he took that next step. Let's see if he can continue that now. Having better weapons at the position, that helps a lot. Having a healthy Jalen Reagor and Devonta Smith definitely will help in any type of progression as a quarterback. So Jalen Reagor for me, going to be a start again. Nailed that one last week. Loving life in the slot. He's being utilized correctly. You saw that play where they did a little screen pass and he took it all the way to the house. Those are the type of opportunities Jalen Reagor can absolutely thrive in. And now he can do that with Devonta Smith being on the outside full time. And for Smith, we knew that the targets were going to be there, right? We absolutely knew that. And that was one of the reasons last week we were like, yeah, start him if you've got him, because we know he's going to get targeted quite a bit. He got those targets. He's a start. Las Vegas and Pittsburgh, and Vegas is coming off of one heck of a win. Crazy game on Monday Night Football, maybe one of the best games that we get all season. For the Las Vegas Raiders, unfortunately, going up against Pittsburgh, I'm going to sit all these guys this week. And trust me, if you're a Raiders fan right now going, Kyle, what in the hell? Don't get upset with me. Don't get upset with me. I'm rooting for Bryan Edwards. I'm rooting for Henry Ruggs. Hunter Renfrow was one of my favorite under-the-radar draft picks in his draft class. We love Derek Carr, and we love balls to the Waller. We've got nothing against your Raiders. I just don't like the matchup, and the offensive line last week just didn't look great. Now, Edwards really toward the end of it wasn't until the end of the game that he even became a start. If it hadn't been for overtime and it had been for a couple of extra passes there at the very end, Edwards looked timid for a majority of the game. So can he take that step forward? We love Edwards. We just got to see it. Same thing goes for Henry Ruggs. At times, he just didn't look like a guy ready to step up. Outside of really one big play, he didn't do much. They forced the ball to balls to Waller. And now we're going to go up against Pittsburgh with a rush defense that's going to be all over Derek Carr. I just think it's going to be a really, really tough week this week for this Las Vegas offensive line. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, again, another team where we're starting everybody, right? It's going to have to be one of those things where we really can't sit on anyone, and we're going to have to know that there's a really good chance that one of these guys is going to be a miss every single week. For me, Juju, Deontay, Chase, all going to be starts. Chase is the one guy that could end up busting out. Ben was a little bit rusty last week, but Juju and Deontay Johnson, of the 18 targets that they got, only caught 9. Ben was a little rusty. It wasn't nearly as good. His accuracy wasn't as good. He was a little bit off. That happened last week. Hopefully another week gets him back into the groove. The run game did absolutely nothing. Look for them try to establish it this week, but Las Vegas and that offensive line or that defensive line, greatly underrated. They did very well with Baltimore last week. They're going to do the same thing. It's going to have to be the same. Get the ball to Ben, get the ball out into the hands of a receiver, and let's go. New Orleans and Carolina. And for the New Orleans Saints, Wow, what a win last week against the Green Bay Packers. I don't think anybody saw that coming. But for the offense, I do have some questions. Right now, Marquez Callaway, Deontay Harris, those are the two guys at the wide receiver position. They ran a lot of two tight end sets. They were running, obviously, with Alvin Kamara quite a bit, and then with Tony Jones Jr. So this is a team that, going up against Carolina, I don't expect them to kind of just run away with the game like they did against Green Bay. That was awful on Green Bay's part. I expect Carolina to bring a little bit more enthusiasm this week. So Marquez Callaway, I am going to go with him again. But there are some things I'm worried about. Last week, he just didn't seem to play as fast as I would have liked him to. Now, I'm not giving up on Callaway yet by any means, but he only played 83% of offensive snaps. Okay, so again, some of that may have to do with towards the end of the game, they tried to get him out a little bit, knowing that the score was what it was. But he wasn't shadowed by Jair Alexander all game. Okay, I know a lot of you in my video when I brought up Deontay Harris for the waiver wire, you were like, "Oh, Kyle, you have to remember Marquez Callaway he was not shadowed by Jair Alexander the entire game." I went back and checked it out. He wasn't on him all game long, and he still didn't produce. So for me, I'm not giving up on him yet. I still got him as a start here, expecting definitely the opportunity for a big play. Jameis wanting to get him going this week up against Carolina. An opportunity is going to present itself. But again, we got to watch it this week. And for Carolina this week, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are going to be starts for me this week, while I'm going to move Terrace Marshall Jr. to a sit. DJ Moore led the team with 8 targets last week, but Robbie Anderson only had 3 targets. And if he doesn't, his one catch was a touchdown that went for over 50 yards. If that doesn't happen, Robbie Anderson has an awful performance. And for Terrace Marshall Jr., I think he needs a little bit more time. I really like that he's in the slot right now. I thought we might see a little bit more DJ Moore in the slot, but we're focusing on Terrace Marshall in the slot right now. He was in the slot 80% of the time last week. So those 6 targets in the slot, I like that, but I think he needs a little bit more time just to get a little bit more comfortable. But as soon as Terrace Marshall Jr. breaks out, Robbie Anderson, we may need to move on from him. I don't think anybody thought Jacksonville was winning a Super Bowl anytime soon, but getting thrashed by the Houston Texans, I don't think anybody saw that coming last week. And now they're going to get the Denver Broncos. And Denver, yes, they're going to be missing Jerry Jeudy, but they still have more than enough offensive weapons to back that up. Courtland Sutton, is he all the way back? He only played 80% of offensive snaps last week. If Jerry Jeudy was playing again this week, I would at this point say I want to give Courtland Sutton another week before I put him as a start. But because of no Jerry Jeudy, I wonder if they do try to push Courtland Sutton back a little bit quicker. Now, he didn't do much of anything last week, and I'm not expecting a huge game out of him. If anything, I'm expecting Tim Patrick to potentially lead this team in targets. There's one thing that we've known about Tim Patrick over the last couple of years. It seems to be when an opportunity presents itself for him to step up, he's always making that call. He's always being that guy. I expect him to be a little bit more of a volume monster this week, but we can't forget about KJ Hamler either. I mean, a decent day last week, but he also dropped a pretty big potential touchdown as well. If he hauls in one of those balls, he's gone, huge touchdown, and now his day looks crazy. So this week going up against Jacksonville, I'm going to go with all of them because honestly, any one of these guys could end up being a start this week, and it could end up going any single way. If I had to guess, I would say maybe Courtland Sutton does need another week, but I'm not going to set him knowing that their other wide receiver one is out. With Jacksonville, Marvin Jones, DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, all of them are going to be starts. Why? Because this defense is so bad that all 3 of these guys are going to get targets every single week. Now, the tight ends, they did see some targets last week, but I expect as soon as the connections start to build a little bit more with these guys, Jones, Chark, and Shenault, all of them could be able to start any single week. Minnesota and Arizona. And for Minnesota, KJ Osborne, he kind of came out of nowhere last week with 9 targets. Now, I don't know if I'm fully buying into that yet, especially if they do work to try and get Tyler Conklin a little bit more into the game plan, and they maybe try to bring Chris Herndon along a little bit. But Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, both of these guys are going to be starts for us. Adam Thielen, a huge day. Justin Jefferson, as I kind of said, if Justin Jefferson sees a lot more of that wide receiver one, cornerback one coverage, then Adam Thielen, that's going to possibly leave him open a little bit more, and they took advantage of that. But is Justin Jefferson fully healthy after spraining that AC joint in preseason? I don't know. He might not be fully healthy yet, but we're going to play him anyway because, dear God, we drafted him to be our starter, and now we're going to go up against Arizona, which could end up being tough, but it could also lead to a matchup where they're going to have to throw quite a bit. So Jefferson, Thielen are both going to be starts. For Arizona, DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk. DeAndre Hopkins, oh my gosh, obviously, dude is absolutely insane. Minnesota allowed 44 fantasy points to their opposing wide receivers last week. For Christian Kirk, right now, he's over AJ Green. Did AJ Green see more targets than Kirk last week? Yes, but Kirk is now a more dynamic playmaker that for a while was the wide receiver 2 on this team last year. And even though they added AJ Green and they brought in Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk hasn't gone anywhere. But Kyler Murray is so good, it might not matter. I would expect to possibly see Rondale Moore become fantasy viable very, very soon. And I also would expect Christian Kirk and DeAndre Hopkins to potentially hold up their end of the bargain as well. Atlanta and Tampa Bay brings in 2 of our biggest what the F from last week, right? So Atlanta's offense last week looked like garbage. Absolute crap. Didn't do anything. Calvin Ridley. He's going to be a start again, okay? Ridley had 8 targets, and Gage had 2 targets, and they were the only 2 wide receivers to get any targets. So Ridley, we know the volume is going to be there, but where's the volume going to be for the other? Mike Davis saw 6 targets last week. Nobody thought Mike Davis was going to be a guy that was going to make any impact in the passing game, and he saw 6 targets last week. Kyle Pitts saw a bunch of targets last week. Hayden Hurst saw some targets last week. I'm not fully sold on Russell Gage at this point. I had him as a sit last week. A lot of you didn't really think that was right, okay? I heard it in the feedback. A lot of you liked some Russell Gage last week. Are we going to get anything from him moving forward? If this offense doesn't get better, it could end up being tough for Russell Gage the rest of the season. For Tampa Bay, though, another team with 3 guys that we're basically going to have to say all 3 of these guys can be in your lineup right now, and we're just keeping our fingers crossed. That's why this is going to be so tough, all right? I got a lot of crap after Thursday Night Football. Okay, a lot of crap from a lot of people after Thursday Night Football. Yeah, I had Godwin, Evans, and Brown listed as starts. But you only saw in the rankings that, oh, Kyle had Mike Evans towards wide receiver 1 status or in that wide receiver 1 area. And then you had Godwin a few spots lower and then Antonio Brown into the 20s. And you were like, oh, what an awful... Was it? I told everybody to start these. And if you own Godwin, Evans, or Brown, if you listen to my advice, you had him in your lineup because I had him as top 30 wide receivers, meaning that of the top 30, you would have had 3 wide receiver spots. You would have played these guys if you owned them. So to just say the rankings were off doesn't make a ton of sense. I get it. But I don't think you all understand that that's how it's going to be every single week because they could come out this week and Antonio Brown could be the guy that gets left out and it could be Evans and Godwin. It could be Godwin is the guy that gets left out and it's Evans and Brown. It's going to be like that every single week. Mike Evans is a guy that has 1,000 yards every single season since he's been in the league. He set a new franchise record for touchdowns last year. You're not setting Mike Evans right now. Why would you? You didn't set him at the end of last season when Antonio Brown was around. So why would you all of a sudden sit him now? I'm not sitting him. But this team is going to be a pain in the butt all season long. Dallas and Los Angeles Chargers this week. And with no Michael Gallup, holy moly, let's take a look at the CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper top 10 train at this point. 31 targets between these two guys last week. And Cedric Wilson is being added right now because of no Michael Gallup. He'll probably be that wide receiver 3, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be CeeDee Lamb and it's going to be Amari Cooper. And both of these guys have top 10 potential, especially now going up against the Los Angeles Chargers, a team that, listen, Dallas is going to just throw all season long. It's going to happen. And going up against the Chargers, a team that's going to be able to put some points up on them, this is going to be another matchup where they're going to have to throw the entire time. Keenan Williams, Mike Allen, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, both of these guys are going to be starts for me this week. 25 targets between the two. And now they get Dallas, who got shredded by Godwin and AB last week. So expect Mike Williams and Keenan Allen to potentially do a lot of the same. And then we'll kind of talk about the tight end position a little bit as well. One thing I am just a little cautious of with this team. Yes, before the season started, we said Mike Williams definitely a guy that has some big play potential, a late round flyer for a lot of you. The problem is Austin Eckler didn't get any targets last week. As soon as he starts getting more targets, I don't think they're going to come from Allen. I think they're going to have to come from Mike Williams or Jared Cook. So we do need to keep an eye on that. Tennessee needs to bounce back in a big way this week, and I don't know if that's going to happen against Seattle, but I'm not giving up on this team just yet. There is far too much talent on this team with A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill to say, hey, we're just giving up on them. A tough first week, but they do have a new offensive coordinator. They do have a new guy in Julio Jones. It's going to take just a little bit of time to kind of get into the flow of things. Going up against Seattle, on the road in Seattle, it could end up being another tough week. But if you own A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, we're not setting them. We can't do it, especially if Russ cooks the way that he did last week. Tennessee is going to have to throw the ball this week. And DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, yeah, we're going to have to start both of these guys. After watching Tennessee last week, it's hard not to see all of this upside here. Tennessee gave up quite a few fantasy points to opposing wide receiver here. In fact, Tyler Lockett, I was looking for a Prize Picks prop on him. There isn't one as of right now, but really whatever it is, I'm hammering the over on. A tale of two teams last week. Kansas City losing the entire game, ends up coming back and winning towards the end of the fourth quarter. Baltimore was winning the entire game. All of a sudden into the fourth, they give up. They can't figure it out in the fourth. They can't put the game away. Las Vegas battles their way back and they end up losing it. Well, for this week for Kansas City, Tyreek Hill is going to be a start for me. Even while behind most of the game last week, Hill was the only wide receiver to do anything against Cleveland. Baltimore did a very good job last week of shutting down the wide receivers for a majority of the game, unfortunately, until the last minute when it matters. But missing some of those guys on defense that they are right now does hurt. But Mecole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson, again, maybe a guy that has a big play, but they're nobody that we're starting consistently right now unless the matchup really calls for it. And going up against Baltimore, the matchup doesn't really call for it. So, of course, we'll have Tyreek Hill out there, but that'll be the only thing. Going up against Kansas City, though, again, Baltimore's going to have to throw the ball a little bit. Marquise Brown and Sammy Watkins, both of these guys had really good games last week. Marquise Brown really picking up where he ended last season. Sammy Watkins had that week one big game that he always seems to have. Can he capitalize on it? What's going to happen to Mark Andrews? Mark Andrews kind of disappeared last week, right? Are we seeing some of that go over to Sammy Watkins? Potentially, but I'm going to have him as a start again. And a game where Baltimore is going to have to throw it quite a bit. Detroit and Green Bay, and what do you want to say about Detroit, right? Somehow or another, they made a comeback against San Francisco last week. I don't know what to tell you. This is not a team that's going to win very many games. So to see him actually put up a fight like that caught me off guard. Khalif Raymond, Quintez Cephas, Amon-Ra St. Brown are the three guys. Tyrell Williams sounds like he has a concussion, will be out this week, hasn't been confirmed yet, but that's what I've heard at the time of this recording. But this team is all about Hockenson and the running backs. So Quintez Cephas did see, it was right around like 100 air yards last week on 7 targets. It wasn't a whole lot. I mean, the opportunity was there. He didn't do anything. They're going to be behind again. I still think Quintez Cephas is the number one wide receiver on this team now that Tyrell Williams is out, and I think he's going to see the majority of the targets. So we're going to go with him because I think Green Bay bounces back this week and absolutely spanks Detroit at home. They're not going to want to go home and perform the way they did last week. They're going to want to get a fire lit under of them, and they're going to want to go. So I'm going with Davante Adams, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and Randall Cobb. All is starts this week going up against Detroit that is now missing Jeff Okudah in the secondary. Not that maybe it really mattered because even before he got injured, he was getting yelled at pretty bad. Davante Adams, they're going to bounce back. It's Detroit. It's on Monday Night Football. They're coming off an awful game. They're going to bounce back this week. You're going to have Davante Adams. And then MVS was actually tied with Davante Adams last week for 7 targets on the team, the most. I expect Detroit to get lit up, and obviously these wide receivers are going to have to be a huge part of it. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my wide receiver start and sit video for week 2. Don't forget, download that Prize Picks app, sign up for a new account with code word headliners. Important, don't forget that. Put in $20 and then you're going to get yourself into the entering for that awesome package that we have to give away. Make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, and leave a comment down below if you've got any questions for me. Everybody have a great rest of the day. Peace out, stay safe. I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.